Hello, Cardstack community. My name is Chrissy, the founding director of the Cardstack project, coming to you from the land of the Web3. Today, we're going to touch on the topic of Boxel, one of the favorite topics that I have because it's about the composability of software, about the open source future, be able to own your software, use the software to create content that you have access to and you can share with who you choose to, really fulfilling the decentralized future, regardless of whether it involves open source, the web, or Web3 or crypto and stuff like that. But there's one ingredient that's entered the scene. Here comes AI. A lot of people are talking about how AI has completely changed the software landscape. People can make software, create content, create new images, and we don't need programmers anymore. We don't need writers. We don't need anybody who is creative because AI gives us everything we need. So today we're going to address that. Like, how can AI correlate to what our thinking is about this generative idea of being able to assemble things from parts using Boxels and building application from fields to forms all the way to the final objects. And when we give this talk in February, I believe, we talked about a system of composable app using Boxel concepts. And one key concept that was really important was to break down what does it mean to build a domain model. A domain model is basically saying that if there's a stack of software that gives you everything you need, all you need to do is to create different types of domain object, invoice, customer, quote, payments, receipt, the things that's important to user, important to business people, and say, as long as we have the data, the schema, and template to support them, then we can run these applications or these boxels or cards that represent the schemas on top of this common platform, have them connect together and don't need 17 different subscriptions to bring it together. And we talked about in the previous talk how these things are basically just documents. The data is just JSON, is a type of encoding for structure. The schema uses something called TypeScript. It's a variant of JavaScript that a lot of developers know to allow you to create well-structured reuse types as a way to compose your application as a programmer. The template, we use the web platform. Boxel is based on the web, so it uses Glimmer, which generates HTML and CSS, and you can style it. And then the business logic about, how do I pay this person, summing the amounts and creating subtotals are all done in JavaScript, which has the arithmetic features and a lot of nice primitives, so you can go and express everything in Express Excel, except a web application. And the only thing you need is to run these kind of domain models of different types of Boxel, vendor, payment, receipt, on top of this common stack, this runtime that runs in your browser, so it can be entirely on your own machine. You don't need to depend on any hosting company, or you can choose to host it so you can have access to it if your computer is off, or it can automate certain action while you're not at your desk. Now, the stack itself is quite complicated, right? The stack contains a lot of the concept we've shared with the community around the Boxels themselves, which is about UI and environments and UI motion system, how you connect different things. Cards, which is a data model around how you can use fields, how fields can use each other. So you can use an address card, and you can use an address card as a field when you're filling a form for some college application. So you don't have to redefine what street address 1, street address 2 can be. You can have computer, which are like formulas. It's like, oh, this is the amount, the total amount, subtotal. Those are cards. And those cards live in something called realms, something you can store like a folder, like storage, ability to pull data from different sources, like whether it's the blockchain or a service that do computation or market data, or you can do messaging. That's really where it gets interesting, and it correlates to the AI idea about using messaging. And there are other concepts like guides, which provide human concepts, and actions, which allows you to automate certain things. And all of these things are just included in a way in this whole system that we're working on, the elements that are very comprehensive, so that once you have the stack, you can say, okay, given the stack, which is software that is going to be very hard for AI to generate, could you generate the simpler domain model that sits on top of that stack? And I think the simple answer is yes, because AI, ChatGPT in particular, it has really good understanding of JavaScript, TypeScript, and CSS because it's trained on a corpus of knowledge all around the web about programmer creating new web pages, sharing on CodePen. All of that training data on GitHub, open source project, becomes the knowledge that this AI large language model, LLM, has to be able to say, oh, if you want something similar to that, if you want a invoice and a logo, I understand how to position a logo on the upper left-hand corner. I know what that looks like in CSS. So AI can generate these concepts, but it cannot generate the stack. But we don't need to, because the stack exists and it provides this uniform platform, not only for developer learning how to program in Boxel, which we'll see some examples of that, to build on top of that, we can also extend that capability. And that's the current R&D we're doing right now, where we can teach the AI to do the same thing a developer would do. And if we can do that, then we can have a lot of agents and AIs through different chat session or API sessions, generating a lot more domain model for user to use at a fraction, if not a thousands of a fraction of what it would cost for a human programmer to put these things together. So let's jump right in. Let's start from the first kind of opportunity to leverage AI, and this is about populating the public catalog. Recall when we talk about Boxel, we say Boxel is a system of composability, but at the end of the composability, you still have to use it for something. So I want to use it for content management. I need to know what a blog post looks like, what a video upload tool looks like, what an image, what a video player looks like. If I want to do social media, I need to know what a thread, a feed look like. I want to know what is included in the user profile, what's included in an avatar. How do you create widgets that can be shared? And as you go from B2B for business concepts like quotes and invoices, even to crypto, to wallets and assets and conversion tools, like this conversion between two things, you can imagine building these building blocks, these Boxels, that can be available in the catalog, where you can say, oh, I just need an address. Let me just pull it from the Boxel card catalog. And then you don't have to worry about having to build it again. It's a component that you can insert into your form or your workflow. So the question has always been, yes, to build the Boxel system from the ground up using the framework and the stack, how do you get people to use it? How do you make it useful, the whole environment, the ecosystem? And the way to do it is to have a public catalog. A public catalog would have thousands of reusable Boxel that's already existing. You just search for it like an app store, but it's more like a template gallery where you're looking for something that's, oh, I want a timesheet or a receipt or something like that. Has someone made something in Word? Can I pull that off the shelf? And that catalog allows people to not start from scratch. They can use something that is off the shelf and then assemble the parts that you want to put together. Now, there are two ways to build that. In fact, there's actually only one way to do it, which is to have developers do that before the AI movement. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of developers, each working on one concept, taking something that already exists in the business software ecosystem and say, hey, let's make an open source version of it using the open source foundation on the Cardstack and building it using the Boxel SDK, and then submitting a public catalog to create a comment. So this would be like almost like generic drugs. So like it's not brand name drugs, is just like a painkiller that is, works just the same, but is much cheaper than a brand name alternative. So developers can contribute their resource or get paid to build this catalog. And that would really benefit users and will give them a slice of the revenue. But with AI, one of the things that really kind of spark our interest is that because AI can generate simple software, and Boxel is designed to be simple because we made the Boxel SDK simple for a developer who knows JavaScript, doesn't need to know all the deep concept, that's all contained within the stack. So it's like, what if we have one developer instead of hundreds or thousands that uses AI to create a tool that allows us to generate all of these reusable basic common nouns in invoice and customers, and basically say, as long as we know roughly what a generic version of a quote is, can we just generate that using fields as in the catalog, and then submitting the new thing, the composite, also in the catalog, growing that catalog like a dictionary that's defined using other words in a dictionary, but it grows and then becomes a useful source for people to search for in catalog and learn how to use these things. So that's basically what we're using on. We were talking about on a blog post about the previous talk about, how the Boxel runtime is like a game engine that allows you to load these Boxel into it. As long as you have this game running, you have these objects, almost like things you can download or buy. Some of them are free, some of them are built-in, some of them are custom, and then you can just have it play. You don't have to boot up different application, go to different URL just to use different Boxel. Once you have the Boxel runtime, that game engine, that environment, everything runs on top. And then someone asked, ChatGPT 4? That seems like a question. Like, how does that relate to the hype that we're hearing about ChatGPT, especially with the new upgrade that is much better than GPT-3? And I reply, early prototype, but yes, we're working on that. And that's I share two screenshots. One is I have this idea Boxel in my head, and I say I want to make a form for a school to organize a potluck dinner, giving a menu of dishes for people to bring, ensuring they commit to bring one, and then mark the food allergies or other dietary preferences. So from that information, right, we were able to give it to a very early, I mean, this is improving every day, and then it actually, based on the understanding of what Boxel is, generated not only the code, right, that allows you to have all the fields to capture these allergy and dietary preferences, but also create some menus of roast turkeys and pumpkin pies, something that is relevant to a wintry Thanksgiving dinner. So that's the power of ChatGPT. It has knowledge of not only software, but how people use software. The language that we use to describe things is encoded within it. So as long as you tell it how to do something, a particular technique to write code a certain way and generate a certain way, it can go and spit some text out, which is a text generator. And it happens that computable programming language using the Boxel SDK are just text files. So the question, someone follow up, Matt, was like, would it be used to create component directly with the Boxel framework? And I say, no, I think the best way to do it is before we expose this capability of generating Boxel for end user, we can actually use it to generate the boring parts of the catalog, the commonly used things that nobody really wants to do. And every developer building a new app end up having to start from like address and customer and repeat all that stuff. What if all those things are already existing based on the kind of like average like models of how that looks like in the web or on SaaS product, and just have all of that basic concept of what business software is, just generate them and then give it away for free. And that's essentially the first step. The first phase is use ChatGPT capability to use AI generation, use the basic knowledge of like how the world is, what are the common verbs and nouns that is in business process and how we model them in software to generate Boxel. Boxel just files, as we talked about, is JavaScript files and TypeScript files. And then that TypeScript files, and we can't use it directly. Sometimes it make mistakes. So we're going to have a human, a developer or something like that, to write some script or humanly look at it and say, approve it for a public catalog. So the catalog now can be built by one or two developers, not for every single variance of special cases for medical software for dental office, but general concept. And I'll talk in a little bit about how we can extend that in the next phase of using the adoption capability in the Boxel framework. But the public catalog would be the root. These are the basic things, not modified, pretty generic. Doesn't necessarily serve your need, but if you use that same concept of customers and other people, and you use the adoption chain, you'll be compatible with each other, as we mentioned in the previous talk. So how does ChatGPT know how to generate these Boxel-specific code, right? These JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, and HTML file? Well, put it this way, we have to tell it what to do with this information. And there's two ways. So we basically have to say, how do you make a Boxel? You have to teach that to them. Now, it's really difficult to train a AI. It costs a lot of money. OpenAI spent hundreds of millions of dollars as an organization to train how a AI can generate things as known in the web, in the common crawl list, in the things that already exist in the web. Well, Boxel is a new concept, so that's not in the training set. But in the training set is basic understanding of JavaScript, TypeScript, web programming, basic programming constructs, error messages, comments, and open source. All these things are in there. So what we need to do is provide a little bit more instruction about, our slice of JavaScript, TypeScript to make Boxel is this. So how do you do that? Well, if a developer say, hey, I know JavaScript and TypeScript, I want to learn how to use make Boxel, they will go to a developer documentation site, and then they will learn, oh, this is how you use the JavaScript to do this thing and write a function for subtotal, whatever it might be. And it turns out that same documentation for developers is essentially the documentation you give to ChatGPT and say, hey, before you generate any code, let me teach you this new way of generating this variant of JavaScript we call Boxel. And that's added to a context window, which is kind of like the text we give to the ChatGPT session before you start asking it to do stuff. So this is a preparation and a small amount of time, but enough to educate it. So we send the developer docs, we're iterating, writing actually for the AI to understand as well as for developer to interpret. So dual purpose. Development documentation is very high leverage. It trains the AI and helps the developer use it. And that context teaches ChatGPT to say, I know how to generate these Boxel files. So what do you want me to generate? So what you want to do is to say, okay, now that you know how to generate Boxels in this particular way, let me say, here are the Boxels I want you to make. So you go to a dictionary of SAS. I want to make the elements of a content management system. So I want a domain name. I want the idea of a blog post. I want the idea of a photo upload tool, a cropping tool. They can make that. People have demonstrated that GPT knows how to use JavaScript library to create cropping tools because that existed already in the open source idea and things that has been seen in a while. So it knows how to write those code. So what we want to do is to say, okay, for each of these business concepts, we have to ask in the right order, so we build it from the bottom up, go make this generation of this Boxel. And then, either we approve it for public consumption or we use previously generated Boxel as like input. So like, oh, by the way, when next time you talk about customers, don't repeat the concept of first name, last name. We have a name Boxel, just use that so they can use that. So this idea of going back and forth and using the context window and different technique of chaining these different generative AI together, we're able to populate public catalog. Here's the important part. We don't need a lot of parallelism. We can do it one at a time. And if we don't like our results, let's say, oh, the AI is not generating well, we just have to update developer docs and maybe do the whole thing over from scratch. Rerun the dictionary. Now, it costs some money, but it's way cheaper than having a network or a army of developers to do it thousands. So this is an iterative process, not to make the catalog one at a time, but to make the whole catalog multiple times, each time dramatically better as we improve the dictionary to tell it what to make and improve the developer to tell it how to make it. So those are the two pieces of information necessary. The docs, how to make it, and what to make. And this dictionary of SAS actually is really about language. So if you take a look at something we have been working on, which is describing all the business category, like ERP is accounting, fintech, CRM, marketing automation, content management system, CMS, associate management system for membership, dev tool learning management system. Each of these categories that exists in the existing Web 2 software ecosystem, as well as a Web 3 software ecosystem like NFTs and DAOs and stuff like that, they have a set of concepts. Those concepts are like payroll, insurance, and invoice. And each of the concept has fields that are related kind of business entity that goes around them. And if we just describe what is it and how does it work, all of this information becomes training and instruction, essentially prompt for the AI to say, I want you to, you want to make an insurance form. I have a general understanding of insurance form. Are these the fields, the premium and blah, blah, blah. It will spits out that information. So we are essentially capturing in language, in English, this information without worrying too much about the actual technical details. Once we get the language or description of the software right, then we get to send that whole thing as files, as prompts, and use the training it has done, as well as the description about how to generate Boxel to see what we can get. That iterative process is very, very much not the type of programming that a developer that does JavaScript would know. It's more like data science, where you try an algorithm, you go against your data set and see what you can and iterate. So generative AI in the generation of software, it's really a data science of a data-driven programming, which means we're programming a large amount of code that can be just as useful as hand-coded, handcrafted code, using essentially the knowledge and insight that comes from data analysis of the language, the words, and also the frequency of usage. How long is the first name? What should be the maximum character width of an address field? Well, that information exists in some API documentation across many, many SaaS. the AI kind of just squinted eyes, like, I think it's like 56 character. I don't know if that's correct, but that's the type of things that we can kind of latently pull from as long as we give the prompt to the AI to kind of withdraw that knowledge and then kind of manifest or reify that knowledge in real code that gets checked in and gets published like real software that runs on top of the Boxel framework. Really, really exciting. Now, what's cool about this, that all the AI generated software for all these Boxels that's in the catalog is basically open source. Now, there is no such thing as an AI owning copyright. The Copyright Office in the US, I don't know if in another country, has been made it very, very clear that they think that software generated by AI is really something that is not owned by the AI, but is owned by the human creator that uses the AI. But obviously, Cardstack really believe in open source. So to the degree that we use a little bit of, billing and, paying OpenAI or other open source tools some capability, we can generate a lot of things with, relatively cheap compared to people. And what we will do is just open source all of them. But what's cool about this is that this open source nature is essentially using the AI as a way to generalize or make into a commons proprietary knowledge that exists in many, many places, right? So different software company create proprietary software, and OpenAI and ChatGPT kind of like squint their eyes and say, I think that's roughly the concept that everybody generally agrees with. It's a type of standardization process as well. It's a conventional wisdom. Now, AI cannot do incredibly creative things, but it can certainly give you a version, a transformed version, something that's already been used in common use, and then make a version of it that you can use without having to lock yourself into various subscription or on-premise software, because it's based on the documentation, the language of description. We're regenerating software that's open source running on the Boxel framework. So this idea that AI and open source is like kind of aligning is quite powerful. I'm really happy of a coincidence that this provided. Now, not all software is going to be useful and adequate for your need if you just take it from off the shelf. Like things that are off the shelf may not be exactly what you need. And we have built into Boxel the concept of accept and adopt. Accept means you start with compatibility. You say, I accept the address field. And then you can say, oh, because we are a shipping company, we have a certain needs to tag a certain address with special delivery instruction. I'm going to adapt that field to add additional elements so that we can annotate that internally within a workflow. When you add those fields, you are still compatible with the general concept of address. It's just that within your workflow, you have a little bit more places to put things, and that system is built into Boxel, the ability to extend what is already out there in the wild and add your capability while maintaining compatibility. We talked about it in a previous talk. But look at a concrete example. If you have an invoice, you pull that from the catalog that's running on the stack, and you say, you know what, I want this invoice to look like my company's thing. So I adopt that and I create an Acme invoice. But instead of coding it or having to hire a developer or even using a no-code to the point and click, you just say add a brand logo and color, maybe describe it going back and forth a couple of times and say I want a spade instead of a heart or diamond. And then, it will then, the GPT will then write the Boxel that maintain compatibility by adopting it. They learn how to do that through developer docs. So you don't have to redo the whole thing. You're just changing the part or adding the part that you want to change. And then you can do another step and say, oh, I want to make a VIP invoice where we have a special discount rule. And this is where generating formulas, enforcing the form fields and constraint. The constraint system in Boxel is called guides. It allows you to say, turn on the guides, and it will say, oh, you're missing this or having that. And that can be also expressed in code. And therefore, the GPT can generate that stuff. And when it's all done, it's going to look something like this. So it has elements of payments that are formatted and embeddable. This is actually a real-life rendering from our internal tools called Builder mode. So this is the mode we're testing the different concept of employees, currencies, and bookings, and invoices, and stuff like that. This is open source on our GitHub. And what's cool about this is that when you're using this invoice, all you're typing is the data. But if you want to say, hey, I want to add a field, you can actually go and load the underlying code that generate that thing in the same environment without having to go and get a development environment going. You can just use that tool and see all that information. And this code, when you change it, immediately live update the templates. So the templates here are essentially being bound together. And that is the main difference of Boxel compared to other kind of software deployment environment. It's a real-time engine where the code lives on this platform versus requiring you to think about servers and host names and deployments and databases. This definition of the code gives you the entirety of everything you need to run it. You don't need any external services. This is really nice because it makes it much easier for us to do two things. One is that we can create an experience where you can use point and click to delete and add a field type. If you don't know how to code, you can just use this form. That actually modifies the code, right? So this is no code, but it's a no code that actually updates the code. It's not some neutered version of programming. It actually is the same code, the same JavaScript, the same TypeScript that we use to run it that you're modifying. You just do it through this binding we've created where this delete a field, add a field name, link to containment, it actually writes the code in real time and then update the edit form that is now showing on the lower right-hand corner of this page. I think you now see where I'm going. This code editing tools can be replaced by a ChatGPT chat session. So instead of writing code or pointing and clicking and adding a few, just add a local in this website. You preview and see it on the right side, and you say, oh, make it blue. And then this update doesn't require deployment, right? You don't have to push the code. There's nothing. You're just seeing it there. When you're done, that code can be sent to someone right away, just like share and copy, because it's just a file, right? You look at the left side of the screen. These are just files. You can share it using a file sharing mechanism that we have built in, and we can use messaging such as the Matrix protocol, which is a chat protocol similar to Discord and WhatsApp, to share these code and the definition of these fields. So it's almost like making a Word document, a PDF, and sending it, and less like deploying an app or getting an account with DocuSign just to be able to fill something out. So the ability for us to create software that is customizable to users means you start with this open source commons that exist in the catalog that we bulk create, and then you can just work with ChatGPT, or if you're a programmer, you can actually write code to do it, or you can be lazy and use GPT to create a new form, add the right fields, and use this concept, and use the right extension, and then you're gonna hand tweak it until it's perfect, until it has the behavior you want. That type of collaboration between code, no code, and AI generation, it's only possible because we have this common platform, common stack that sits underneath all that stuff. Okay, so when we have created this basic capability for code that are either written by users, written by developers, customized by user, or generated by AI. Users, regular people who don't code and doesn't know how to like interrogate software and a bot to get something, they want to use these forms and they want to autofill this information. They want to automate their workflow using these forms that exist in this common catalog. How did they do it? Well, this is where we have to look at Boxel. Boxel is both code and data. We've talked about that. The code is a schema, the domain model, the template, which is comes out of the box, as well as you can customize it, make it look however you want, and use whatever control that you want to do from a UI point of view. And business logic integration. When I click pay, right, some Boxel will integrate with Stripe and PayPal, and some would integrate with USDC on Polygon. These things are abstracted by the fact that you have a form that say pay and an address and payee, but how it's implemented is wrapped in the business logic or the integrations. So that's the code part. Let's forget about it a second. Let's assume that's available. Using that code, what you can then do is to say, what is the data that I'm putting into this code? So the form-based app means that the template allows you to edit and present the information, so you're editing data. Sometimes you can also use content. We're building a blog post use case right now. It's like WordPress type of stuff, so that you can enter text. Well, text is just a field. Media is just another field that links together. It's a little bit different, but the same infrastructure for storage and retrieval. And then settings as well, like your preferences, such as I like to fly an aisle seat in my flight, so I can save that information and use it to fill out a form when someone say, do you want aisle seat and window seat? If they understand the same idea of seat preferences, I can have that information. Now, AI can generate code. We have proven that, and we can generate it better and better, more efficiently with less number of context variable, and with greater accuracy and greater reuse and greater quality. It can also generate and transform data. A lot of what people play around right now with ChatGPT when they're trying to like write poems, write lyrics, and create reports and even write papers is that they so impressed with AI's ability to take the sum of human knowledge and your intent and your prompt and generate something that sounds really good, especially GPT-4 is better than, I would say, 90% of people ability to write or create or report on things. So we know that data is something that GPT can create. So the question is, what can you do with the assumption of Boxel that allows you to use this code and stack that is already ambiently available to do use cases? So one way could be fill this form out for me with my data. So let's say your data is already in Boxel, your address, your seat preferences. You can say, fill this form out for like an itinerary, and I don't have to copy and paste and refill it. Browser has autofill, but only restricted to like name and like credit card, and doesn't do it on everything. If you're doing a college application and you have a personal bio, you can't reuse it without copy and pasting. This way, GPT knows that, oh, the form is expecting or accepting this field. You've got a piece of data in your personal library that has that field. Let me just try to match it. And this is the best part. Because Boxels are encapsulated, it doesn't need to put each word in there. Just say, oh, use address 16 and put it in that place because that's your home address. And then you just have to use GPT to do the matching. You don't have to do it, type every single word in your address. So the second one is suggest a flight and hotel based on my calendar. So if there's a access to your personal data, which is your calendar or through some API or something like that, you can then send that information and get back flight information from that as a way to orchestrate. There's already integration with ChatGPT plugins that can do that, but that's all proprietary with one service with Kayak or something like that. But with Boxel, these information are almost like a Word document. You can share with your travel agent and it maintains a structure. And that type of collaboration people do need. They can't do it through a website. Sometimes they just fall back to using Excel. Well, now we have a much more well-formed version of this for user to exchange, but also for AI to create so that it's always in the right format, because AI, ChatGPT will generating format that complies to this standard that is already in that common library that's in the public catalog. Now, let's go a little bit further. It can rebalance your portfolio and adjust more market risk. The AI can get market data, and that exists, and my portfolio, it may have to go and look at my wallet and see what's in there, or look at my portfolio within my trading account, and then generate a instruction, whether that is a blockchain instruction to swap something for other things to rebalance. Now, obviously, we want humans to press the button to say, yes, I approve this set of trades or swaps, but you can certainly imagine a situation where within certain type of risk, you automate and let the bot do something like that. So this idea of being able to generate the parameter for an interaction, it could be a Web3 action or signing action, or it could be an API call against an existing financial service provider. Those are the use cases you're now starting to see in the proprietary way, and you can certainly use the idea of Boxel to reason about it at a high level. Instead of just text, you can think about it as forms that maintains its structure and provide validation rules. So you can just move those Boxels around versus have them recreate them. Finally, approve expense report for me unless it's fishy. So a risk management for automating mundane actions can be done using this as a layer. Now, it's important to note that in the Boxel layer, in the runtime, it doesn't matter if an AI is generating a form or user is typing it. The same way it doesn't matter if your password manager is filling out a password or you're typing it manually. To the underlying system, it's just, oh, it showed up. So it's a layer that really sits on top very independently. So one way to visualize how this works is to think about the ChatGPT engine as a message thread. Now, for Boxels to run, we need to run in our environment, in our browser window, so we won't be using the ChatGPT user-facing application that you guys are playing around with, but actually using the API. So we will provide an alternate message thread that runs Boxel to understand the concept of forms and reports and fields so that we can kind of orchestrate a very cohesive experience without having to like use iframes and stuff like that, which is how the plugin system works. So the OpenAI stuff sits in the middle. So when I say I want to fill out the form, what you're really asking the AI to do is to copy your data into the form, right? By transporting a field or linking them. There are different ways to do it within the Boxel system. Sometimes it's actually a copy, sometimes it's just a reference. And then that information is now made available to third-party service. So if you're actually booking a flight, the flight and hotel information, which is also in Boxel format, has a well form, now just gets into your form in its entire entirety. So it's like a screenshot. It maintains a structure. So that now hopefully you see how important for us to conform and understand the exact type, and making sure that everybody is talking about what a flight is, understand flight numbers and booking codes in a universal way. And that's what the public catalog is about. And that's essentially the form that you would then say, okay, I'll submit that, and then I generate a booking. That booking goes back to the third-party service to actually get you a seat on a flight with an existing system through the IATA or whatever United Airlines system. But you can also keep a copy of this booking form. So this is not a PDF or a screenshot. It's actually a live memorialized form with all the data that you put in there. So you can say, hey, I want to book this flight again. You can actually use that booking form as a starting point. The same way you save the document, you can open it up as a starting point. So that's in your personal library. So that's the idea. This ownership of data is not stuck on a server, because Boxel moves so fluidly between your personal space, this space that you're sharing with the AI, and this third-party services. And then when you're done, you can say, I want to take my data and maybe like where I want to get reimbursed for this flight, and there's my credit card data and the booking itself and submit an expense report, and that will go into maybe another message thread. That message thread may not involve an AI, maybe involve your supervisor or your company's accountant, or it may involve a AI assisting that person on the other side, processing the expense report to do the automation. So as you can see, AI is really just automating what people do. It's a layer on top of the Boxel system, on top of this idea of movement that is so fluid in the system, right? And here's the thing. If ChatGPT were to disappear, right? Right now, every single thing that you have done on their UI will disappear because they are a hosting provider, right? They store all the records. They know your username, login using the Microsoft or Google account. If they disappear or they ban you, you lost everything. This is why it's so important for this information to be based on an open source toolkit with data that is files that you can save to your computer, or to back up to a hosting service of your choice, or back up from the hosting provider and put a new hosting provider if you believe that that provider is doing something shady. So the idea here is that the idea of open source requires us to think about one other concept, which is open state. Is the information that you're creating using the open source software, which AI can generate more open source software, that's fantastic. But right now, given what the trends are with OpenAI and the proprietary nature of their fundraising and stuff like that, they want to own your data. They want to own your attention. They want to know what word you're typing. They want to know how you're using information. They want your information and your interactor to train the next generation AI so they can own the intelligence that's running the world. That's pretty dystopian. I hope that's not where it's going. I hope the word open in the OpenAI remind them that they have a vision and the mission that they should maintain. But just in case they go full like Skynet, we want to make sure that we are able to introduce the open source wrapper using the AI only as an API. So if it disappears, we switch to a community trained GPT equivalent. Instead of using the GPT-4, you use some other system like Llama or whatever it might be. So that means that the economy for the people who spend the money and time and energy to training, they have to get paid, right? You're paying OpenAI or getting a subscription or paying per token or per 1,000 token in an immediate way to do, to write your papers, whatever it might be. There's one company with one credit card getting paid, and they can pay out money or they cannot. But it will be very difficult to design a system like that where all the other provider, maybe with competing model for generation of images or interpretation of images for medical sciences, for them to all like work within that $20 that OpenAI is collecting. So an open economy is going to be important. Right now, it doesn't seem like the open economy is happening within the AI stuff. But it's very, very hard for me to imagine that it would not be an important pillar of an open software ecosystem that has that open source shared code with the open state where you have your own data and you can share the data with what you want, and an economy where people can train AI, maybe even do a customization service for other people, write agents for them, or eventually be even a person who is going to help people learn how to do it, teach. They should get a share of the value that this new software ecosystem that is enabled and enhanced by AI is going to do. But open source, open state, open economy is roughly JavaScript, data on your on your files, like Boxels on your file system, and data on the blockchain is shared, and the ability to use cryptocurrency and other type of decentralized finance or DeFi capability to share that revenue. And that's what we're working on in different aspects of our organization, including Chamber Protocol, Boxel, and the open source and open state, with the idea of realms and hubs and stuff like that. So the open source ecosystem, this slide we have actually used in previous roadmap discussion, just have AI. AI is one aspect of it. But our vision and our mission to build the open software ecosystem that takes the lock-in away and give the user back in the control and use open source software to say, hey, your data doesn't need to be with a particular vendor in silos. And it certainly doesn't need to be one vendor who's trying to be the only place you can interact and do business and make things and create new value. That's pretty scary. So it's important for us to take AI into consideration and say, this tool is powerful. We are using it as a productivity tool for us to generate the library of standard Boxel so that you can start using the Boxel when we have the new environment and the new motion system for operator mode, as we call them. So you don't need to know how to code in the builder mode that I've shown you a screenshot of. You can actually interact as if you're like moving files around in Finder, except with the abstraction of fields and cards and accept and adopt, these high-level concepts that makes it look more like a business application. So I hope this was a helpful introduction to at least our work in AI, but more importantly, zooming out a little bit and look at how AI, Web3, and open source can actually achieve this open vision if we work together. The ability for a single company with a group of dedicated engineers and data scientists and researchers to show it what's possible reminds me of iOS. Like a singular vision of Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive's team, they invented this new thing. Well, AI can't invent things. AI can spread it and make it more commonly available, but someone needs to break through. And I applaud the OpenAI team and other researchers in the AI field for pushing us forwards and understanding how do we make things that used to be expensive, like writing software, easier and cheaper, so that it's more available, we can make more of it. If we make drugs cheaper through generic drugs, more people get treated. So more people have access to software because they will get cheaper, and hopefully we have a part to do with it. But with that being said, I want the Android version, I want the Linux version, I want the open web version of that. And hopefully with Boxel being the substrate, not only in coordinating the interaction with AI, but also with users more traditionally, maybe AI is not involved, people are just exchanging forms and looking at them, replacing emails and attachments. That would be really great. And that's our focus right now, is to make sure that we keep an eye on what AI is going to be and making sure that we're using that leverage, but also shipping really useful software on top of this pre-existing open source code that's already been public since day one and is continuing being iterated on. We're really excited about the work we're doing here, and I hope that you will follow the project on our GitHub, github.com/Cardstack. There's different aspects of work we're doing there. All of our AI R&D is being published there as well. But most importantly, we have to work together as a community to understand that the open ecosystem requires contribution, requires people to understand that every single time you see something good and it's proprietary, trying to make an open source version so we can compose it without permission, without license agreement, without subscription. And then once we have that capability, leverage Web3 tokens, DeFis to find a way to make sure that everybody who contribute to the ecosystem all the way get the fair share of the reward. This is happening. The world has been accelerated. We're glad to be part of it. And we hope that with the open source foundation we built, we can bring AI healthily in an open way to the world to make software much cheaper, much faster to use, and it reads your mind. But at the end of the day, it's your mind is supporting, and we're just being better humans in a world we are assisted by AI agent. So thank you very much for your time and attention today. As always, follow us on Twitter, and as well as on our YouTube channel. We publish talk as well as a conversation with other people building really cool stuff in the intersection of the web decentralization. Until next time, take care.